Ready. Ooh, welcome to Books We've Never Read.
Except for those we have.
I'm Nicole.
And I'm Jason.
And this is episode 5, but the first episode in Cixin Liu's Three-Body Problem, part 2, The Dark Forest.
Right.
Yes. Did I say all that right?
This is part 1 of The Dark Forest, which is book 2 of The Three-Body Problem. Fair enough.
So the book is The Dark Forest by Cixin Liu. Part 1. That's where we are.
Yeah.
Oops. Sorry. So, before we jump right in, make sure if you have any commentary as we go along, please include that in the comments below. We love reading what you have to say about it. And I know some of you have been watching and you're like just waiting for us to get further along. So I look forward to what you have to say. This should be in a playlist of its own for The Dark Forest. If you are just now seeing this for the very first time and you want to know about the first book in the series, hop out of here and go into the playlist for The Three-Body Problem.
Mm-hmm. And if somehow this is the first time that you're ever joining us, you're welcome to go back, and we have a video about sort of what we're doing with this channel and why and how things work. So you're welcome to watch that one so you can keep up with us in the future. We have 2 more weeks on The Dark Forest. We will be finishing part 2 and posting that next Sunday, and then part 3 will be the following Sunday.
And that schedule is in the information box below. And then we'll move straight into
whatever the third book is.
Yeah.
I don't know the name.
I think it
doesn't matter.
Okay.
The third one.
The third one. I gotta know.
Death's End. Right.
Yes.
So, let's go ahead and get started.
Sounds optimistic.
Yeah, I guess it does. Let's get started.
Okay. So, doing the whole part as one reading is a whole lot. So I hope y'all are as overwhelmed as I am with it. But I just kind of have some questions, and I thought that we could go through these questions, and maybe that will tie in everything together, and we can go back and forth and have little side conversations as we go. But my first question.
So bless anybody who kept up with us for this week's reading, because this was huge, and we didn't quite understand how large it was going to be when we divided it into sections. For anyone who is reading at your own pace and then watching this, hopefully it is easier for you. But we read every spare minute we had to get to this point. And because of the way the book is broken up, it is difficult to try to keep up with things. And I have some thoughts about how I'm going to change my notes next time to try to make this discussion easier. But it is a huge amount of information that we're talking about today.
Because it's exposition plus continuation.
Right.
And so that's what makes it so complex in this first part. And so how has the world changed since the world has learned of the Trisolarans in part 1? And we can back up after this and talk about the prologue, because that actually was before. That was before the world knew.
Yeah, sure. So I guess the big things are we see a lot of like the military preparations. We see them blasting nukes into space. We see at least the Chinese version of the Space Force really getting things going. We also see a lot of politics in this one about the planet trying to figure out how to share technology and do their Wallfacer thing and all that. And so it's all, everything that was sort of done in secret in the first book is now in the open in the second one. And things are starting to change, right? Things are starting to get in gear to prepare for this crisis.
So, and we are just in crisis.
Sure.
So how do you see the changes of people's values and attitudes reflected in part 1?
Like people in particular?
Just the regular folk. Who represents the everyman?
I gotcha. So yeah, we have one of like the oddest sections is all these people, like the three dudes.
Neighbors.
Yeah, the 3 dudes hanging out in their apartment complex, and
Yan Chao, young Lao Yang, which is like young Yang.
Okay.
And
the other guy.
Yeah, there's one other.
Well, I mean, like, so one of them just like doesn't care and doesn't want to pay attention to it, and one of them like never cared about anything before and now does.
Yeah.
And then you have like the pit boss guy, the mine boss dude, and I don't know. I mean, like, it's kind of interesting to see how people are thinking about it, but they're very like cartoony feeling to me, and so I'm not sure they would be representative of people in the world. Like in any kind of depth, you know.
But through us kind of peeking in on their conversations with each other, we see the news running in the background with Ding Yi, who we saw in book 1. He was our billiard table guy, and Dong Dong's boyfriend. We see him doing an interview on TV talking about how the media is not doing a good job representing these issues and the science very well, but then he talks so high level about it too that I was like, well, you might be part of the problem there. Right. Like, you gotta bring it down a notch. So I thought that was a fun way to kind of catch us up to where we are in the world, was through them. And then we also see John Yun Chao get caught up in this escapism fund. Which is run by
Dashi's
son. Yeah. So that was all kind of interesting. I'm upset that the government, that the world has made illegal any attempts at escapism.
Really?
Yes.
I support it. Like, I get it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So one of the motifs that I noticed it in book 1, but I also notice it here, is kind of the government versus science. Like, the government trying to, like, science happens because we need answers, and we have problems and we need solutions, and so the scientific method is a natural process for solving our problems and figuring out the whys of the world. We have this very real situation coming up in 450 years, and this is a perfect opportunity for creative and scientific minds to come together and find a way to ensure our survival.
Right.
And that survival should be, it mostly aligns in my mind to exploration of the rest of the world. Now that we know there's other stuff out there, why wouldn't, I think it is natural for us to, it's time. Let's find a way to build these machines that can sustain biospheres within them, or life, or whatever it is. I mean, we can hibernate, we can do whatever. Let's boldly go. It's time.
But I don't think that's what they're talking about, right? They're not talking about making like a bunch of like generation ships that are just going to go out into space, right? They're talking about making like one, right? They don't have the technology right now to do that, right? Like, the technology doesn't exist. And so if we divert some of our best minds, and if we divert some of our best resources to do this thing that we cannot do, then that's resources that is not doing the thing we can do, which is defend ourselves.
I thought about that. I think it is just as unlikely that we can defend ourselves. And so if all of our options are probably not very likely successful, why wouldn't we let everyone take the best chance that they can?
Well, so if you say if you do these two things, then this one thing, defending yourself, is like guaranteed not to happen, right? Because like you have, and I'm not saying like you'll win, but you could defend yourself. Like, you could put up some kind of defense. And if you go out on these ships, you still might not make it, or you might not ever build them, you know. And if we defend ourselves, we might win. But if we do both, we definitely don't win, and we still might not make it, right?
I don't think. I'm just not understanding how we definitely don't win if some people are choosing to invest time and generations and energy into,
because we need everything we can get.
I think there's room for both. There's a whole world.
Nah, I mean, you need to make it as sure a bet as, like, whatever bet you're taking, you need to be as sure a bet as possible.
So how do you motivate people, though, when you've stripped them of their options?
Oh, death is a powerful motivator. Right? Like,
but they think they're going to die anyway.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Like, y'all are all going to die if we don't figure this out. So let's figure it out, right? But that's part of it, right? So I don't know if they actually mentioned it, but this is a thing the Romans would do when they would show up on the shores of some foreign land, and the soldiers were like, "I don't think we can do this." They would burn the boats. because now you have to. You can't go home. There's no turning around. You're stuck here. And this is their version of burning the ships, right? There's no more escapism. We're not going anywhere. Earth or nothing.
I just think it kills the creative mind and the creative spirit and the, spirit to survive.
Right, but like I am creative every day, and it's not to get off the planet, right? They pay me, and they can still pay people, right? All of the normal incentives are still there.
I would not be motivated to have children if I knew that their only option, over the 450 years of children's, mm-hmm. their only option is having to fight the Trisolarans. There's no motivation for me to
yeah, maybe not for you, but like that problem exists now, right? Our children are gonna have to fight climate change and all kinds of like nonsense.
Well, that's what I keep coming back to.
Right, like that existential threat is still real.
It is very real,
and people are still having kids. But
there's a lot of people that are like, there might not be a planet here to.
But there's no evidence that those people wouldn't have had kids anyway if had everything been fine.
The point being, I disagree about this whole let's make escapism illegal. I think it's a perfectly good resource and a great avenue for time and energy. And if I'm wrong, please continue telling me.
Well, I don't think anybody would think you're wrong, but I see the value of make this the surest, best bet possible, right? Or if we're going to do escapism, abandon the planet, we're all getting out of here or whatever, right? But I agree with these three guys hanging out in their apartment too, right? Where they're like, well, what about the poor people? What about the rich? What about the wealthy? Like what about the intelligent?
Make it a military situation. Like you sign up, you train, like you do it all.
But not everybody gets to go, right? And so how do you decide who gets to go? If you defend the planet, we're all here,
Right, and those who don't get to go can defend the planet.
Okay. I like the egalitarianism of us all defending the planet. I like the resource allocation of us all defending the planet. I'm not like a big fan of telling people they can't do stuff, but it doesn't really bother me in this case because escaping seems fundamentally selfish to me.
Well,
and I suppose the argument could also be made.
I think it's wrongfully called. I think that is a misnomer. I think it's not escapism; it's continuation.
No, it's escapism. You're running from a fight.
We're continuing the species elsewhere.
That's fair.
But that's just
right.
That's just so okay. So that was kind of attitudes and values of people. We do see that conversation between Luo Ji and the girl that he's with at the beginning. Like neither of them want children. Mm-hmm. Their lineage dies with them. Just they're not motivated to kind of continue in this situation. And then you kind of mentioned military and strategy. Okay, so I have a question. There's, the book is divided, or part one is divided into ... dots.
Yeah.
And like little segments or whatever. All the segments with the Hubble 2.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And then, so that's Fitzroy and Rainier.
Rainier.
And then there's also a ... that has, they're in Alaska.
Yeah.
With Raider,
mm-hmm.
and
that's early on.
You got NORAD
mm-hmm.
doing their thing. What was I supposed to get out of this part?
I think it's just kind of showing us where like the current Earth defense is, right? Like they're
okay. That makes
so
sense.
Number one, like this book actually does a really cool job of wrapping up. excuse me, some of the issues with the Sophons. And so like one issue was that whenever they built the Sophons and they were unfolded around Trisolaran, that like blocked out the sun and all this stuff, and they lived in the dark. So why don't they just do that now and like suffocate us, right? Like they could just kill everything on the planet by unfolding around the Earth, like they did Trisolaran. And so one of the reasons now we know that won't happen is we can shoot nukes up at them and we destroy them.
Okay,
so part
that's
of it.
Raider.
That was that first part, right?
Yeah. Thank you.
And then, but also the Hubble is really just like where are we at in watching this fleet show up, right? Like because
that's
up until this point, like it wasn't really real, We had like ETO conversations. We had the "you're all bugs" part.
Yeah.
But there was no evidence.
Visual. Okay, and yeah. I forgot that happened right at the end of part 1.
It's the last part.
When it's like I counted 1,000. You're like, oh no. And I did also make a note. There was that disconnect between science and government in that the guy's like, well, it costs however much money to rotate the Hubble. We'll rotate it. Like, okay.
Right.
Like, that's funding, man. And, like, you know.
But, like, at this point, it's all fun money, right? Like, they're just going to keep printing. They've already started making reference to the fact that, like, there's going to be shortages and there's, like, recession and stuff like that because it's not real anymore, right? Like, nobody's playing by the rules. There's one mission now, you know.
Right.
All the money that we spend on spaceships and the Hubble and all this stuff is never going to have any, like, commercial application, theoretically, right? You know, like so microwaves were created by the U.S. government, and that ended up having a commercial payoff, right? But
unfortunately,
there's no payoff for like missile silos in space or whatever, you know.
Could be payoff if we actually focused on like boldly going.
We'll talk about it later.
I really want to travel to space, man.
I'm into it. I'll go.
All right. So, let's talk about the wall breakers.
Okay.
And Wallfacers and the wall breakers.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I mean, so yeah, you can't do one without the other.
So we've got Luo Ji,
Mm-hmm.
who's kind of our main man.
Yeah, you definitely get the vibe that even though we get a lot of like points of view, it's his point of view that we are supposed to care about the most.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely a feeling I get. Because we do get points of view from the other wall breakers.
Yes. Yeah,
but
we do.
It's nothing like what we get for him.
Right.
Yeah.
We get deep thoughts and feelings and emotions from Luo Ji. Now, so can we pause with Luo Ji, or do you want to do an overview of all the
do however you want.
Wallfacers and breakers? Do you like Luo Ji?
I kind of feel indifferent to him. But I think he feels indifferent to most things, and he's like a leaf in a river, right? He's just kind of going and doing his thing. I think he's very selfish, right? Like, I don't like the fact that he's been given this responsibility of being a Wallfacer, and he's just like, no. But I'm not shocked by it. It is in his personality.
And there we differ. I was so excited when he like described his perfect place to live, and they were like, we found it!
Yeah.
And that dude is just chilling his little days, drinking his wine. Remember that one wine that he pulled up from the bottom of the ocean?
I think these are all funny, but
yeah. But I love that he's just like living his days. I do not love that he has Dasha find this girl that
he's been kind of creepy with this lady.
Looks like, his dream girl that he had written up. Which, reading all of that.
Wow. Yeah. Can we talk about that for a second?
Let's talk about it.
That was, we talked about in the first book. There was something that was like a book within a book. It was the whole like revolution and everything like that.
Oh yes.
And how I would have read a story that was just that.
Mm-hmm.
And this like dude falling in love with a literary character I thought was so well written and so interesting, and I would have read that book.
Yeah.
No problem.
It was.
But like, he's not well, right?
But when he tells his counselor about it, the counselor's like,
yeah,
it's not that crazy, man.
Yeah,
like, love is in your head anyway.
Look, I don't know anything about doctors in China, but you remember that one time when what's his face went to the doctor and was like, I see numbers, and he's like, I don't know.
He's stressed out.
I don't trust any of the doctors. They're like way too chill.
As I'm reading it, first of all, I'm just like struck with how it's all very beautiful and
sure,
and a little crazy, but like haven't and I don't want to say haven't we all, but like I know that I've imagined up some really weird things, like not weird things, but like intense imaginary friends, when I was a kid and stuff like that. I mean, and you do become emotionally attached to things that might not even be real, and I think that is very normal, but I think it shows how creative of a mind we have in Luo Ji, especially for him to be a scientist.
I think it's natural for people to become attached to things that are not real, right? Like millions and millions of people do this,
Harry
all
Potter
the time. All kinds of stuff, right? But I mean, it's just the intensity. I think what draws the line for me is like the seeing, right? Like, we are led to believe that he literally sees her.
Can see her.
And that's a problem.
That is a problem.
That's a problem.
It might be in the DSM, huh?
Oh yeah, it's in there. It's in there.
It's in there. But I'm not cool with him bringing Yan Yan to his estate.
Yeah, I think it's weird. I think it's like kind of creepy. But I just think, would I hang out with this guy? And I don't think I would. He seems like washed up. He seems like he's given up, and it's all because of this like relationship he had or whatever, right? Where he had the most real thing ever, and it wasn't real, and he's just like stopped doing everything else.
Yes.
He's just not going anywhere.
I also wonder, and let's go back to the prologue. Yeah. So something happened between the prologue and his girlfriend at the beginning of the book.
Yeah.
He made it big with his cosmic sociology or whatever it was. What happened there? Because he doesn't seem to be working when he's...
Yeah, well, it does say that whenever he was dating that lady that told him to do this story, where he met this girl, it does say that at one point he was teaching and giving a lecture, and he looks up and he sees his character. Right? So, I mean, he was still being a professor or something, throughout that time, up until this fantasy. And then he just kind of quits. And we're led to believe that fantasy wasn't really all that long ago. I mean, like, and we have a couple other things. It's hard to tell. So we know when Yang Dong died. Right, so we know when that gravestone would have been put there from the prologue. We also know that Da Shi tells him, like, I just got irradiated a while back, and so, like, now I have cancer and have to go do this thing.
Right.
And so, like, we're realistically talking, and the graveyard speech is sometime before he makes this character up. And so, I mean, we're talking about the span of, like, 2 or 3 years, most likely.
Yeah. So, okay, also with just how bizarre it is that, okay, so he's made up this character and can see her, and he's imagined this perfect place to live, and now he's there, and then this girl is really in front of him for real. Am I crazy for thinking, like, what if it's the Sophons doing this?
So I've had the same thought, like, what if this... So it's I didn't quite think that, but my thought was, like, what if we end up somehow finding out that, like, just the universe isn't real, and this is like a matrix,
it's just
and
a
like
simulation, and yeah,
and like maybe the first book would be real, but this one wasn't, or something like that. And I have no evidence for that at all, but it is a little convenient, right? I mean, but there's a lot of people, and so
there's a lot of people, and like we all have little doppelgangers, and I mean, there was even an article recently in the news about how, like, genetically there's someone who looks very similar to you.
Yeah,
but it's just all so intense, and also like you said, like, he shouldn't be able to see her.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think, Luo Ji, they make this comment where he is the only Wallfacer who is in direct competition with our Lord. That's what they say.
Yeah.
Then there's this other thing where when he asks, when he asks the guy in charge of the UN, he says, why was I chosen? And he says, and the guy says, like, well, I wasn't on that committee. But then he says, like, we really don't know why. That's what he says.
No one knows. Who chose them?
What does that mean?
Who chose? Who's the infiltrator here? Who is part of the ETO that's in on all this UN stuff? That's what I want to know, because some of this stuff is too... I don't know. It's too something. It's too fishy. And what did Dasha say in book 1? If something seems too weird, there's something behind it. Like, he said that. Yeah. I'm yelling. Let me use my inside voice.
Well, but but that brings me back to something else Dasha said. Like, whenever they're in the plane going to the UN, he teaches him how to, like, be tricksy. Yeah. But he does that because he knows that he's going into this position of being a Wallfacer.
Does he know?
He absolutely knows. He absolutely knows. Okay. And that's why he tells him this. But so then part of me thinks too, like, what if Luo Ji's already started, right? Like, what if from our point of view, watching him, we're led to believe that he's just like some kind of playboy and doesn't want to do this, But like, what if somehow he is, and we as the reader are the ones who are being fooled?
So I also thought that too, but upon going back through part one while I was making my notes, I saw a part like right before they went to the Louvre where he was like, "Screw the Wallfacer project." I mean, he thought
But
that.
that's why But he says that.
Did he say it out loud?
Yeah, he says
no,
that.
but he thought it too. It was in italics.
But how do we know he thinks that? Right? Like.
Well, all we can do is trust our narrator.
Yeah, we don't
and
want to.
And on top of this book that's topsy turvy, can we also not trust our narrator?
I have a feeling we have an unreliable narrator.
Okay, so Chen Shi Hung is Luo Ji's wall breaker. Is he?
That was one of the guys in the computer world?
Yes.
Okay,
is he? I think, was it Wen?
King of Wen? Oh, I made that note. Yeah, I wrote that too. I said it is the wall breaker King Wen.
I also asked that. I think it is.
Yeah, I think so too. I don't know that yet, and we'll have to wait for.
But I think because the goldfish scene where like the
Yeah.
Sophon was like, "Your goldfish are dead,"
Yeah.
and then he gets right. The next scene is going into the game.
They tie them way too closely.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the next time he has a conversation with a Sophon, it goes into the game again, and he sees Aristotle.
Yeah. So talking about that guy though, that like lived in his little room by himself and never left, with the goldfish. He gave us an answer to a question that I had in the past reading about like why didn't the Sophons tell Mike Evans that he was going to get sliced in half on the Panama Canal?
They needed him to go.
And they were just like, we're scared of you.
Yeah.
Right? And so all of and that was not quite the prologue, but it's the only. There's also a part where we see Mike Evans, I think. Oh yeah, Micah.
Yeah, it was right
where
before
Mike
he got
Evans
sliced
has
up.
this
His
conversation.
I was audiobooking that part, so it was very difficult to hear who was saying what, but it was like, we're scared of you, we're done with this conversation. I had to pause it and like go look in the book. I'm like, wait, who said what?
So we know the Trisolarans have a problem understanding the difference between think and speak. And so we're starting to get a little more into that. They have no capability really whatsoever for being deceptive, and they're like, oh, we can. It's just if somebody then asks you, hey, are you on the other team, then you have to tell them or whatever. But so I think that's really interesting. But so your question earlier at the very beginning of the show was, what do I think has changed about Earth, right? The fact that we now know that this other thing exists and we've had some level of contact changes, like, so we know that Sophons are possible. Maybe we could find a way to make our own, which we can't because the Sophons are making a problem, whatever. But I made a lot of notes about the flip side. How are we changing Trisolaran society before they even get to us?
Yeah.
When you don't know that being deceptive is a possibility, and then by the end of it, this reading, that guy in his little room says like, hey, you've learned to hide something from me. Can you imagine being the one Trisolaran who has learned deception?
You'd be the king.
Yeah, it's over. And then once that starts leaking out and getting everyone, how does that change? And like, does that cause the society to like self-destruct on its way in because it was not pure, not like that, but like you have introduced this very powerful element.
You've introduced the virus into the board.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's really interesting. And I think, obviously over the course of this book, we're going to watch human society change. But once we finally do come into contact with the Trisolaran society, what we will see in 400 years is not what left that planet because of the contact that they've had with us.
Right. And that puts us at a disadvantage, I think, in a way, because they will see how we have changed.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and we won't have seen any of it.
But they'll be on 450-year-old technology, and we won't.
Yeah, that's true. But their 450-year-old technology is better than anything we have.
Right, because they can make it here. We can't do that yet. So, with our other Wallfacers, we have Tyler, who goes and visits Al-Qaeda.
Yeah! That was crazy! I read that part last night.
And then I had a full stop. I was like, what do you mean Al-Qaeda's name is the same name as Asimov's Foundation series? But Al-Qaeda means base. And so in the Chinese language, instead of transliteration, they use translation. And so they called Al Qaeda the same thing as they call Asimov's foundations. It's the same word.
Right. Like, yeah. Okay.
Foundation.
Wow.
But this whole conversation of like, so you named your organization after Asimov, and the guy was like, let's just keep that a legend. Because that doesn't make sense.
Right. Well, that conversation was very interesting because he was like, this organization runs on hate, like, because they're trying to figure out how do we keep people motivated for 400 years to do this thing.
Well, and Tyler, his whole concept of the mosquito army is to have
a bunch of like suicide bombers, right? Like that's what it is.
Right.
And so he's going to the people that he feels are the best of the best in this like weird, perverse way.
So uncomfortable, and I'm like, why do you have to be the American?
Well, but I mean, I guess like in my head, like as an American, we have like very serious connotations about that organization, whereas a Chinese author doesn't necessarily have like the same like what is happening here.
But it was cringy for him to go to the kamikaze memorial, like, and then be like, "What's the problem? Why don't I'm come to your great country to initiate this to start back up?" And the guy's like, we kind of don't like to.
Well, then the Al Qaeda guy comes up with this like very Ichio answer where he's like, you know what? If the aliens kill us, but they kill the West too,
the enemy of our enemy is our friend. So they're okay with the Trisolarans. So as Tyler was leaving that region or leaving, that area, and there was the boy, and he asked the boy if he had ever killed anyone with his gun, and the translator was like, "No, there's not been any fighting for a long time." That comment, "Mom, I'm going to be a firefly," came back up. Mm-hmm. Is that a hint that they will be the mosquitoes?
Maybe someday he will.
But
not really, but
all of his commentary afterwards was that was not a successful venture.
Yeah, but that dude.
But why did he say?
I think but like again, you're supposed to be tricksy as one of these Wallfacers or whatever. He's still going for it, right? He's going for it. He pitched to everybody. They were like, "This is dumb," and so he's like, "Nah, I wasn't serious." But like, that's what I would do too. If you were like, "I don't like this idea," I'd be like, "Yeah, it's a bad idea," and then I'd go do it anyway.
I think that was a clue to us that it was more successful. A seed had been planted, I think, in that visit. Why would he have said that again?
Yeah. I don't know.
Interesting.
I do find that line to be very powerful. I also find the guy's whole like plan to be weird and cringy, but that line is very powerful to me and sad. But powerful.
Sad. Yeah, it hurts me.
Yeah.
Manuel Ray Diaz. He was the president of Venezuela. He had built this thriving community, but in this world, we infiltrated his country.
Yep, and then he beat us.
Vietnam situation.
Yeah, and he just wants to make big nukes.
Big old bombs.
Big old nukes.
We have Heinz, and Aristotle is his wall breaker. Heinz and his wife kind of came up with their idea of let's just
make science
load
better.
Human knowledge up as best as we can, and
there's just what I would consider like the you have like the mosquito plan, which is like a very specific plan, right? Like it's the narrowest of the plans. You have the bomb plan, which like if you make 1,000 bombs, you can use them however. So it's like the middle road plan. And then you have Heinz, whose plan is really quite broad. We're just going to try to open up and improve science as best as we can, and then somebody else will come up with like the real plan later on down the road. So it was very interesting how we had like these,
I feel like, so by the time we see the end of the scene at the Louvre with Luo Ji and Yan, and they're trying to convey meaning through their expressions. So this reminded me, you had a comment on like memology or whatever, and we all know the like Darmok and Jalad at Tanagra, like, can we use memes that don't say anything to convey messages? And I bet some people watching this knew exactly what I was talking about with Darmok and Jalad at Tanagra. Like, can we speak in meme?
Right.
And can we not speak at all and convey information?
Yeah. Interesting. And their attempt was like not particularly successful, right? But
no, it was kind of cutesy and silly, and they were falling in love.
But I could have full conversations with some friends only using
references
to different things,
yeah.
and I think it would be relatively effective.
Most
and maybe that's
women
something...
can talk bad about someone in the room using only references from like Friends in the Office or Real Housewives, and like the other person would be sitting right there and hear all the words and have no clue that trash was thrown down.
Gotcha.
I mean, it's, so I think that they're onto something. I think between Himes and Luo Ji, even though they are not communicating, because Luo Ji is not participating in the conferences or anything like that, right. I think between the two of them,
well, and
that's where the success is.
This whole thing, like, hey, this is supposed to be a secret plan. Could you show up at our hearing next week?
What is
and tell us what's going on?
But I guess it's, I don't get it.
Well,
I keep trying to like,
I get
well,
the
it's
whole
like resource gathering, but I don't get it.
It's a level of oversight, and then I guess there's supposed to be like it, and so like a point I had made earlier when we briefly talked about this was there's no way you're going to hide a mosquito fleet from Sophons,
right?
So you might as well talk about it,
right?
There are some things that you just can't hide. I guess like the intent or the plan of what you're going to do with this stuff is what you're trying to hide. So.
As I was reading through part 1, I kept thinking a lot about the very beginning of, like, the prologue of part 1. And that's the ant tracing his way through Dong Dong's gravestone. And the ant is aware of the path that he's taking, and there's some familiarity, but by the time he goes to the next path, he's forgotten the previous path. He knows there's a spider above him somewhere. He knows that there's humans. He recognizes eyes. But the communication isn't there. And so there were so many times as we read through part 1, we're all bugs, right?
Right.
And I'm like, okay, so this is in this capacity, like with the science, we're the ant. We are aware, we can see the eyes, we're aware of some other presence, but we just don't quite have the mental capacity to remember the 9 once we've left it.
Right.
And I don't know, like I haven't all put it together, but like I am understanding that it's the author's trying to make that comparison and remind us that we are the ants.
Yeah, we're bugs, right? And like I think like the ant thing is just your average human being, right? They move on to the next thing. They find happiness. They enjoy this shape. They would like to continue this shape. They will continue. They move on to the next shape. It's not as fun, but like whatever. But that was absolutely just a callback to that last line in the first book. You're all bugs.
Yeah. What else you got?
Let's see.
I had, we were really talking about, we were really talking about forced stuff in the last book and how that was a motif throughout literature. Well, I happened to click on a footnote in the book about probably when the ant was tracing out Dong Dong's name. And it means winter poplar.
Right.
And poplars are trees that are symbolic of endurance and conquest. Which I had to look that up. I didn't just know that because I associate poplars with something else far more terrible. But winter is a time of, like, we tend to think of it as like dormancy, but it's really a time of like quiet reflection and like building, maintaining and building so that you can be powerful during the spring and all that stuff. So I just thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah. There's only one person really that we haven't talked about yet, and it's the other, so I definitely think of all the points of view that we've seen, Luo Ji is sort of the main character as best I can tell, but there is another main character, and this is Zhang Beihai, and we haven't talked about him yet.
Zhang Beihai with his dad.
Well, so we've already had this conversation about how our main protagonist sees people that aren't there. Zhang Beihai is not well either. And his dad has this whole thing where, you won't be, you're not really good at what you do until I can't read you, right? And, his dad, for whatever reason, raised him to try to be unknowable. And what a powerful tool is that against the Sophons.
Right.
And so I think we're going to see a lot more of him as we go.
Good job.
I don't think that's healthy or good.
No. But he's a person.
But he has been put in charge of what we would call the morale of people, right? And he's trying to like root out escapists, and he gets rid of his buddy Wu Yu and all that. And
is that what he needed to think long and hard about, and then think long and hard about it some more?
I don't think so. I don't even think like the conversation with his
Because
father.
I went back to that, and the thing that happened right after
I don't
that was
think
him
so.
busting him out.
I don't think so. I think whatever if that was foreshadow, it's coming to. It has not yet come. I don't think, but he is supposed to be unreadable. That is something different than what his job is, though, right? That is a skill that is bigger than what he has been assigned, and so that's going to come back around somehow.
Yeah,
where he will be instrumental in some kind of plan.
It was real sad when Wu Yu compared himself to the Tang.
Yeah.
And but like the Tang was retired, and
right.
at least it got to see the ocean. And
yeah.
That sucked.
But that relationship between the two tells us something about Zhang Beihai. It tells us, like, I guess what I'm going to call his ruthlessness. Right, he is willing to out his partner commander because he thinks it's what's best for the group. And so I feel like we got the least progress in his arc.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like with all the other arcs, there are things happening. We're going somewhere. With Zhang Beihai, I did not get that same feeling. But I think it's coming. You know, these are all important steps, and it's important to talk about like the morale of the troops and like how we're going forward. Like all that's important in the same way that like it's important that they explain to us how the Hubble 2 works or whatever, right? And it's kind of the author's style. But his day will come.
Okay.
His day will come.
Well, so part 1 ended with the next 5 years went fast, and so I guess it's gonna leap us forward 5 years.
Okay.
For part 2. What else do you have on your mind?
I think we've probably covered most of the stuff that I've written down. Let's see.
Dasha.
Yeah.
Oh,
what about his boy scamming people, and then his boy goes to jail, right? Like he has that whole conversation. And his son goes to jail. He's like, call your mom if you need anything because I'm going to hibernate.
Yeah, he's going to hibernate so he can wake up and defeat leukemia.
Right. Pretty funny.
But that means that we'll get to see him later.
Yeah.
Even if it's just for a little bit.
Right.
So that's good. That makes me happy.
Yeah, I think we've talked about most of the stuff in broad strokes, right?
Right.
I mean, we're talking about like a couple hundred pages. Or 125, something like that. There's a lot of stuff to read. But we don't want to get too in the weeds, you know, and we don't want this to be too long for anybody watching.
But I'm sure other things will come up later. If it was something that we didn't talk about and it becomes important later, it'll come back up. Yeah. What's up with that? Sorry, one last thing on my mind. What's up with Manuel Ray Diaz becoming allergic to the sun?
Yeah.
Or the phobia of the sun or whatever. Is it like when he finally realizes like how much is to be unleashed from nuclear weapons?
Maybe I kind of got that feeling. It all happens in the same scene where they talk about the behold, I'm become death, destroyer of worlds. And his sort of realization that the sun is really just like a giant nuclear reaction. It's just a giant explosion.
Yeah.
And he's like, nah, thanks, I'm done. My other thought is that the Sophons could have done it to him somehow. I don't know how or if that's even possible. But that's not like a condition you just recover from. I assume in the second book he will still be hiding from the sun.
Or did a wall breaker do something to him?
It's possible.
Perhaps?
It's possible.
His wall breaker is Mosey. I don't know if that means anything to anybody, but I wrote it down.
Gotcha.
Yeah. All right. Well, I mean, that's all I've got.
Yeah. More than any other reading that we've done so far, if y'all have comments about something or if there's something that we haven't talked about, we would love to talk about it. We just want to do it in the comments since we've forgotten to discuss it. So hopefully as you guys have watched this, you've come up with something that we've forgotten or that we should have discussed. Yeah. There's just so much and there's no way we'll ever be able to do it. So and beyond that, we encourage conversations between our viewers. We'd love for that to happen. You don't have to talk to just us.
Absolutely. But we hope y'all are enjoying it. I very much enjoyed part 1 of book 2. Very much looking forward to part 3. I think part 2. I think it's shorter.
Okay, cool.
And then part 3 is going to be a
Gotcha.
stretch. So, bump up your audiobook speed.
Cool.
Listen in the shower, all that.
Well, thank you very much for watching this again. If this is your first time here, please feel free to go back and watch the other episodes. Subscribe. We do this every Sunday right now.
Mm-hmm.
Once we finish this book, we'll be reading the 3rd book. And then after that, we don't know what we're doing.
And we still haven't decided.
We haven't decided other than probably not sci-fi.
Right.
So we'd love to hear some other suggestions as well. And you can also do that in the comments.
Yeah, please do. I had a little spreadsheet going.
Cool. That's great. All right. Well, if there's any other videos you guys would like us to make, we'd also be interested in that. We just had a conversation earlier today about maybe talking about some of the books we have read, just in brief overview.
Like some nonfiction, because we won't really do nonfiction this way.
So maybe some like a video of book recommendations, things we found helpful.
So if that's something you'd be interested in, just let us know.
Yeah. Well, thank you for watching. We really appreciate it.
Yeah. See you next time.
See you next time.